Welcome to Bipolar She. I'm your host, Janine Noel. Bipolar She is a storytelling podcast about living with mental illness. The content of the show may include stories of suicidal ideation and suicide. At the show's website, bipolarshe.com, I've listed ways to find support. If you ever need immediate help, please dial 988, a suicide and crisis lifeline. I believe in the healing power of writing and speaking about our darkest of days in raw detail. So let's go. Today I sit down with Tracy, who shares her lifelong struggle with anxiety that would shoot up at milestone birthdays when her life at 30 and then 40 didn't look like what society suggested it should be. Coping with a diagnosis of generalized anxiety disorder, then panic disorder, and then agoraphobia caused by panic disorder, Tracy would spend hours of her day in fear of panic attacks and came up with some creative maneuvers. But particularly learning to manage agoraphobia, which for Tracy is an inherited disorder, Tracy kept her life together with barely a soul knowing what was inside her mind. Welcome, Tracy. Thanks so much for coming on the show.
No problem. My pleasure.
So I want to go back to a time when you mentioned being stuck in the Target parking lot.
I was driving home for work, something I used to do all the time without incident or problem. And I would be so afraid to drive that I'd have to pull over and wait. And one day I pulled over into a Target parking lot and I was trying to wait out, I guess, my panic so I could get back on the road and get home. And it was a very long wait. It turned from 20 minutes to 30 minutes to an hour to 2 hours to 4 hours. My body was numb. I couldn't move. I was just too afraid to do anything. I was too afraid to leave. So I just sat there.
What were you afraid of?
The easy answer to that question is I was afraid of driving over the Benicia Bridge, which was strange because it was something I always did. But there was a time where all of a sudden I developed this panic. And then at first I didn't know why. And I was just so afraid to go over the bridge. So I'd pull over and I had this app. It was like a traffic app. And like when it was red, it showed that there was like a ton of traffic. And when it was green, it meant I could go. And I would just sit there staring at that app. It stayed red a really long time, and I would just sit there and wait it out.
So what were your feelings when you went across the bridge?
Fear. I just wanted to, it was kind of like I wanted to hit the accelerator and just drive as quickly as I could, getting on the bridge until I got off the bridge. I just wanted to get over it.
So you have to take the bridge to go into work and home from work?
Correct.
So how did you keep this up and make it to work?
So I would try to avoid traffic. I leave for work at 6 and get there by 6:30. So I was able to get there very quickly. And then at night, when I would leave, I'd wait it out, but sometimes I wouldn't wait out long enough. And I'd just end up sitting in that Target parking lot for hours, just waiting for something to subside so I could go home, but something was holding me back.
When did you know that you needed to get help?
I feel like I'm pretty smart, and I feel like I knew I needed help probably early on, but I was so embarrassed and ashamed. And I, at first, wasn't quite sure what was happening to me. So I really didn't want anyone to know. And I was always kind of trying to be the person to solve my own problems before I had to ask for help. But this problem, for some reason, became debilitating. And I just wasn't able to move at some point every day. And it was just very strange and scary.
About how old were you when this was going on?
I think I was about 42 at the worst of it.
And had you always considered yourself an anxious person?
Yes. That was the easy answer. Yes, I have. I've always been an anxious person.
Were you an anxious kid?
Yes, I was a very anxious child.
How so?
I've always just kind of classified myself as a nervous wreck. I don't know why. I've just been a worrier, which I know is not uncommon. I remember at a very young age, I was always worried, didn't want to ever stray off course. I didn't want anything bad to happen. I was just always so afraid that something was going to happen. And honestly, I'm not sure what that something was, if it was death or getting hurt, or I just always had fear. I just remember as a child, I was always a worrier. I was always fearful. I bit my nails down to the, down to the cuticles because I was always so nervous. My age, and at that time, it wasn't really addressed. I think people just thought it was normal. She was an anxious kid, which, was not uncommon.
And your parents knew that you were anxious?
Yeah. Oh, yes. Everybody knew I was anxious.
Were you shy?
I think, and it might even kind of be how I am as an adult. I start off as shy, and then if I feel comfortable with people, I open up more and I'm a little bit more of an extrovert. But I feel like I was always kind of a shy kid.
And so I think I read somewhere that you were valedictorian of your class.
I was valedictorian of my college. They picked, I think, the top certain percentage of the class, and we were judged on a speech that we wrote. And I guess people liked my speech, and I got chosen, and I was valedictorian of my college.
So you were able to put your nerves aside and do that.
Yes. I think it's because I was reading something I wrote. I've always been able to kind of express myself better through writing than just putting myself out there with no notes, with no story, with nothing to prompt me.
So you've always been a writer.
I've always been a writer, yes.
And you feel like you're more honest in your writing than you are with other people in person?
I do not feel it. I know it. I'm way more honest in my writing. I'm almost like a different person. I'm much braver in my writing.
So go ahead and tell me the story about this anxiety as an adult that you have, and when you really saw it for the first time, and then how it took you into your 40s. But I'm just curious because it seemed to grow out of more of a generalized anxiety, and then it became quite specific. Is that how it worked?
Yes. So when I turned 30, something very weird happened to me, and I wasn't really sure, but I was having a lot of physical issues. I was losing weight. I was feeling nauseous. I was having trouble eating. I just didn't feel like myself, and I didn't know. I couldn't place it. I couldn't place what was wrong with me. I was always I've always, like I said earlier, been an anxious child, but it was more than that. Because there were so many physical aspects that I'd never experienced before. So I went to a lot of medical doctors, and they looked at me and they said, there's nothing wrong with you. I went to see a therapist. From there, they said, well, yes, there might be nothing physically wrong with you, but you have generalized anxiety disorder. And to be honest with you, I was 30 years old, and I probably had never even known what anxiety was. It wasn't talked about back then like it is now. Now I feel like anxiety kind of takes center stage to a lot of things. It's in a lot of pop culture and all over social media and on TV. But back then, when I was a kid, it was never really discussed, and it wasn't something I was aware of. It wasn't until like I was 30 I realized, oh, I have anxiety. Anxiety is a thing, and it's something I have. So from that, I took away that I think when I turned 30, it was kind of a trigger. It was a big milestone birthday, and I wasn't where I wanted to be in my life. I think I always thought 24, I would be married, I'd own a house, I'd have a spectacular job. Maybe a few years later, I'd be pregnant, have children, and that never happened. And as I got older, I felt like it was more of a stigma that people were starting to judge me because I was a single woman. I was 30. I had cats, so automatically, you're a crazy cat woman. I think at the time I just had the one cat, but then I went to 2 cats, so that's multiple cats, which I think automatically puts you into the crazy cat woman category, which now is a title I hold proudly. But that's when it triggered me, and that's when I first realized I had this anxiety. And I've always been a big people pleaser, I guess you could say. I felt like I was letting everybody down. I was letting my parents down. I'm an only child. They didn't have a son-in-law. They didn't have a grandchild. I was letting myself down because as a woman, these are the things I was supposed to be doing. These are the things my friends were doing. These were the things my family was doing. And it wasn't happening. And it was just kind of all bubbling to the surface. And I was triggered by these feelings, but I was able to handle it. And I handled it for a good 10 years. Then I turned 40 and I was nervous. I already knew in the back of my mind, okay, you kind of went a little crazy at 30. And I was like, I hope it doesn't happen again at 40. Because when I was in my 30s, I did go to therapy for a little while, but we kind of felt like, okay, you know how to handle these things. You're okay. And I felt like I was okay. And I was able to handle my anxiety. And that was that. When I turned 40, anxiety hits you at many different ways. A lot of these issues that would come up when I was driving. I would just get very nervous, would get very shaky. My palms would sweat. My feet would sweat. That's really attractive. Back of my knees would sweat. Never got that one. But for a time being, I just kind of, okay, this is just who I am. I'm an anxious person. These things are happening. I've got to try to calm them down. My company, where I worked was going through a massive renovation. That was probably the most stressful work project I've ever been through to this day. And all of a sudden, and this is where the driving came in, I would start driving. And as I was driving, my knee would start shaking uncontrollably. And I'd just get this fear of panic that would wash over me. And I'd usually have to pull over, stop, calm myself down. I was just terrified every day. And it finally hit me that when I had these instances with my knee trembling and driving and all this, I was actually having a panic attack. It took me a really long time. I had a few of them before I realized what was happening. Yeah, it was it was pretty scary. I remember that feeling, the feeling of something happening and having no idea what it is or how to stop it or how to control it.
So what did you do? Did you reach out to a doctor?
Would probably have been the smartest thing. I did actually. So I did go to therapy. I worked with a therapist. She was giving me tools to calm down, things I could do, breathing, exercise, stuff like that. And then one day, I remember there was an accident or something. I was stuck in the middle of the bridge. And all of a sudden, this feeling started to wash over me. I got very nervous. My knees started shaking. My body started shaking. And I remember, since I wasn't moving on the bridge, I threw my car in park and just sat there and tried to breathe for a little while. Eventually, I think I pulled all the way. I ticked a lot of people off, but I got all the way over to one side and I, got as close as I could to the edge of the bridge. And then as soon as we started moving again, I just turned off and got off the road completely and then went and sat somewhere to calm down. At that point, I was just like, why is this happening? I developed a fear then because of that. I'm like, because every day I cross the bridge to go to work and go home. And I thought, this is going to happen again. I know it's going to happen again. I felt it was happening again. I almost felt like I was bringing it on to happen again. And that's where I got extremely scared. I was just scared. I was like, what's happening to me? I felt like I was like malfunctioning. Something was wrong. Something was off. I talked about it in therapy. And she told me she thought I had agoraphobia. And I was really surprised because I'd heard the word agoraphobia before, and it was always used when talking about my grandmother. My grandmother passed away the year I was born. She died of a brain tumor. And the reason why she passed, well, obviously it was a brain tumor, but I had always heard that she was afraid to leave the house. And she was so afraid to leave the house, she never went to the doctor, and she never got the care she needed, and she passed. And I was told she didn't leave her house because she had agoraphobia. So I was confused when I got that diagnosis because I'm like, well, I can leave my house. I have to leave my house. I have to go to work every day. I have to go out. I have to go food shopping. I just didn't understand. And my therapist said, agoraphobia is not necessarily the fear of leaving the house. It's the fear that you can't escape something. So probably when you were on the Benicia Bridge, this is her telling me that you have a fear that you can't get off. Like if you're getting panicky, you're getting frustrated, you're getting scared, you can't escape. You're stuck there. You're stuck with these mounds of cars. And that's exactly what was happening. I was scared. And then I got scared to leave the house. I got scared to leave work. And then I ended up in those darn parking lots. I ended up on a hill one day. I was getting close to the bridge. I noticed there was a little traffic coming. I completely panicked. I turned off before getting on the Benicia Bridge. I ended up on a hillside, believe it or not. And I just sat on that hillside like I would in that parking lot. And I just sit there for hours, just too afraid to move, too afraid to leave, too afraid to go home.
Yeah, I'm curious about the fear. Did it get specific ever? I mean, beyond just being kind of trapped?
Yeah, I've thought about this a lot over the years. There's another part to agoraphobia, or another name. It's agoraphobia, and then there's something called agoraphobia by panic disorder. And that was specifically what the doctor told me I had. I had gotten so fearful of my fear of having a panic attack that it became debilitating. I felt like I was losing control of my limbs. I was losing control of my body. And, part of me the obvious fear was I'm going to hurt somebody. I'm going to hurt myself because I'm driving it. I think I feared dying. I think I feared crashing. I think I feared, I don't know, it was bigger than me. So I put on a good show. I was always in control at work. And then when I would leave, that's when all the panic would happen. It was easier going to work because I would leave so early. Everybody thought I was just such a great employee. Like, gosh, she's there at like 6:30 in the morning. I'm like, yeah. But really, I was just so terrified of what would happen during the drive that I would just work around things so I could avoid these attacks that I thought would come on.
Well, who in your family was able to help you through this?
Well, this went on for a long time. I can't remember how long, probably close to a year, where I would sit in the Target parking lot. And I think one night I was so tired. I was so drained. I had been sitting there for hours. I couldn't move. My app that showed the traffic was not turning green. And I finally just called my mom and said, I'm stuck. This is happening. I can't move. I need some help. So both my parents came, and they one drove my car home, one drove me home, and that was kind of the start of them helping me through this. But at first it was just kind of more like a Band-Aid, like, oh, good, my dad can drive me to work. Oh, someone is going to come pick me up and take me home. It was kind of like a Band-Aid over the actual issues of what was happening. The elephant in the room, the thing I did not want to talk about was, how do I fix this? And I kind of knew the answer. I thought I'd probably need to be medicated in some way. I mean, I was terrified to go to therapy because I thought that made me less of a person or not able to handle things. But when I went to therapy, it really did help me. So I guess medication was a potential next step. It had always been brought up to me from the time I turned 30 to when I was sitting in the therapist's office in my 40s talking about my panic attacks and agoraphobia and all that kind of stuff. And I did see a doctor about it. And after being on it for a little while, I kind of thought, why didn't you do this years ago? It probably would have helped you a lot through life. You can look back, hindsight's 20/20, but I'm just thankful I had my parents. I could talk to them about this because I really couldn't talk to anybody else about it. I'm thankful that medication, thank goodness, did work, because if it didn't work, I wasn't really sure what the next steps would have been. But it did help a lot. Not in a quick manner. It did take a while. Took a while for the medication to sink in. Took a while for me not to be so afraid. For years, I did always take the side roads driving to work, but that eventually got better too.
You said also at milestone birthdays, things got particularly intense. So I'm curious, what societal norms or issues came up for you?
As I got older, there was always kind of talk about, oh, Tracy's so lucky. She's single. She has nothing to worry about. She's got no kids. She's got no husband. She's got cats. They always bring up the cats. But, I think part of that always kind of hit me. Okay, I'm single. I have, all I have is my job, and I don't have to worry about anything. And who cares about my feelings? And people with children and relationships and everything are more important than me. So I'm just going to be quiet. And I'm going to, listen to everybody and be there for them. And then if something's wrong with me, I'm not going to say anything. And kind of what was discovered through many years of therapy was this is how and it unfortunately still kind of is my MO. I just kind of tuck things away. But the problem is when you tuck things away and don't talk about things and try to hide things, eventually they're going to boil up. And for me, they boiled up in the form of a panic attack when I was driving. And these things have still gone on, even with medication. I've been on medication since 2017. Part of the problem with the panic attacks and sitting in a Target parking lot and sitting on a hillside and all that, I got very depressed because, I couldn't talk to anybody about these things. And it just kind of settles with you. So I feel like when you get older, and I've written about this a lot, but I feel like, when you get older and you're a woman of a certain age, I remember being young and going to weddings and like, Tracy, when are you going to get married? Tracy, who are you seeing? Tracy. And, and then as I've gotten older, people don't even realize I'm there. They don't ask me how my life is going. They don't ask me anymore if I'm getting married. They don't, they just, and I've noticed a lot too. This is way too much information, but I was thinking about this the other night and it's bugging me. So I'm just going to put it out there. I've noticed I had a big breakup a few years back that just really hit me hard. And, I've tried to get back out there, and I've tried to do the online dating thing, which I hadn't done in like 20 years, which is different. And I've canceled all my accounts. But on it, the one question a lot of these guys ask me, like the first thing they ask me, do you regret not having children? And I'm like, that's not what I want to talk about the first, hi, how are you? What color are your eyes? I don't want to talk about, do I regret? I mean, first of all, that word regret. But, these are the things that have always stayed with me. And I've always, at the worst, I am my own worst critic. And I feel like people are judgmental of me because of maybe my anxiety, because of my marital status, or none because of my cats. But, no one's more judgmental than I am. But all this stuff just kind of festered, and I'm just trying to find a way to control it. Has kind of been, it's been hard, but it's been something I've focused on. I know it triggers me now. As you know, I just had a pretty big milestone birthday, and we've already discussed 30 and 40, so you could probably figure out what birthday it was. And, I saw it coming, and I'm medicated. I still feel, even at 50, even feeling probably, again, too much information, dried up and God knows what, I just feel that I'm still being judged for the same things, but even worse now. And I did think at like 50, I'd be over the, hey, you're not married, you don't have any kids, but you do have a lot of blessings in life. And I want to feel like that. I want to be that person, but I can't stop focusing on the things I don't have, the things I didn't do. And part of it's like, I don't know if it's because I really wanted it, or part of it's because I thought I was supposed to have it. Does that make sense? I feel like I'm just, I don't know. But it's just all come to a head at times. So
I think it totally makes sense.
Okay.
It
going off on my 50-year-old.
Makes sense.
My
It's a
tangent.
big birthday.
It is.
It's coming up for me, and you can't help but look back and see where you are, and of course, compare yourself to others.
Mm-hmm.
For me, I was like, oh, someday I'm going to blend in. Someday I'm going to have the partner and the family and the house. And then I'll blend in with my family and be accepted. I don't have any of those things.
Me either. I'm right there with you. I feel the same way.
And yeah, so fitting in, I have to learn that that's not going to be my place or my solution. And I have to do things, my way. But there's a loss too. For me, I thought, oh, there's still a chance to have kids one way or another. Mm-hmm. But when you hit 50, it's like, not so much of a chance,
Yeah.
Even in different ways. And
I mean, anything's possible, but I feel so tired. It's funny to say this at 50, but I feel like I felt in high school again about my body, about, I'm heavier. The online dating was probably not the best for my psyche. No one's looking for a 49-year-old curvy whatever, they want the 25-year-old. And, so it's a lot. It's a lot you take in. And then I always just kind of bring back my issues with my panic attacks and anxiety and depression. And then I just worry, is something like this going to throw me into that? So I'm trying to not be like that and not get that way. But there's stuff that's always out there, I think. And it's hard. I probably do bring a lot of anxiety and this on myself. I mean, I'm the harshest judge.
So how do you feel calm, or what makes you feel the most calm?
It's a great question. Probably wine. I don't know. I mean, I think writing is always, writing is something I love to do. I've always had a mental break in my head or something that's told me you're not good enough to write. So I don't do it as often, but it's really, for therapeutically, has always been amazing for me. When I used to get to work at 6:30 in the morning, I would write for an hour on those dark days, and that always made me feel better. And I probably did more writing that year than I ever did in my entire life. And still to this day, I mean, I still love writing. That's kind of my escape. It's kind of, I had a blog for a while, and I thought I started it as a little bit more superficial about something, but then it just kind of really became a personal blog where I shared a lot about myself. And as scary as that was, it was also very therapeutic. It was also very rewarding. And it was also an outlet for me, because to this day, I still hold stuff in. I don't want to bother people. I don't let people know what I'm feeling most of the time. So having that outlet, whether it's just a journal for myself or a story or something, will always be the best thing for me to relax.
So writing is the best medicine.
Writing is the best medicine, but Zoloft helps too. Sorry, I had to add that in there.
Well, thank you so much for coming out and sharing your story. And it sounds like you're doing well.
Yeah.
And hopefully you'll continue. And I really hope to read more of your writing.
Oh, thank you, Janine. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. California's children are facing heartbreaking challenges with mental health issues. To address this, Being Well California is leading a campaign with the California Department of Education to create a California Mental Health Awareness License Plate. The student-designed plate will support youth mental health programs in the state. With an estimated project cost of $850,000, just 10 individuals, companies, or organizations could make this initiative a reality. And every donation plays a crucial role during this critical time. Visit beingwellca.org today to create a legacy for generations to come. Let's bring mental health into the light, even if just a traffic light.